What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of Pistons Daily, where you can find daily content covering all things Detroit Pistons, Monday through Friday, all year long. My name's Kyle Garrison. I'm your host. You can find me over on Twitter at Kyle Garrison2, where I talk all things Detroit sports. Come on over, say hi, give me comments, questions, concerns, episode ideas. I'd love to hear from you guys. But let's just dive into this episode. Today, I want to talk about Ron Holland, some options at the 37th pick, Simone Fonteio's future in Detroit, and if the Pistons are truly serious about pursuing a stretch big this offseason, who might make sense and what that might look like heading into the offseason. But first things first, let's talk about Ron Holland. So in Ron Holland's rookie year, he averaged 6.4 points per game, 2.7 rebounds, 1 assist on 47% shooting, 24% from three-point range in 15.6 minutes per night. So if you're a casual viewer looking at that box score, it looks like he had a pretty underwhelming rookie year and didn't quite meet expectations of the fifth overall pick. And I can totally see that. I agree that there was definitely some moments where Ron Holland showed some immaturity and showed that he's going to need to improve in multiple areas of his game if he wants to be a consistent piece of this rotation. But there's also some things that stood out that make me think he can be a really solid bench option next year and be one of the wings that comes off, plays good defense, can space the floor at least a little bit, and also has the ability to get downhill and finish at the rim. The first thing I want to touch on is his defensive rating. 110.9 defensive rating last year. And out of rookies who played 55 games or more, only 3 had better defensive ratings than Ron, that being Pelle Larsson, Donovan Clingan, and Tristan da Silva. I think all 3 of those players are very defensive-minded players, and I truly believe that Ron Holland has a more promising offensive package than all 3 of those players. Ron Holland shot 66.3% from within 5 feet. At 19 years old, only 6'8", and playing at pretty much the small forward position, shooting 66% from the rim, from at the rim, is really, really impressive. And he showed the ability to finish with both hands. He showed the ability to finish over taller defenders. He exposed mismatches, was able to take people off of the dribble. And one of the most impressive things I think I saw from Ron Holland last year was his ability to kind of contort his body in air. He utilizes his athleticism really, really well for a 19-year-old. And there was times where it looked like he was a little bit out of control going downhill, and he found ways to kind of contort his body and utilize different angles to either finish shots or at least give himself a look that has potential to go in. I feel like there's a lot of times where rookies, when they're out of control, they have this, they're susceptible to turning the ball over or drawing offensive fouls. And it felt like Ron Holland had those moments at sometimes. But then there was other times, especially in that Knicks series, where he got a full head of steam and he was finishing over guys like Mitchell Robinson and finishing over guys who are clearly taller and more experienced defenders than he is, but he still was able to utilize just his quickness and his savviness to find a way to finish. And I think that's really impressive for a young guy. I think that can translate to a lot of different areas. I know it's really concerning that he shot 24% from 3. I think that is very valid. That's a valid concern that you have if you're a Pistons fan. But there's a lot of things he did really well last year that you have to look at. And if he can find a way to become more consistent in the holes in his game, then I think he really could be a 25 to 30 minute per night guy on this team when they're kind of headed in the direction of pushing for an Eastern Conference championship and they're trying to win it all. I think Ron Holland's a piece of this future, and I would be really surprised if he didn't make a pretty significant leap from year 1 to year 2. So moving on from Ron Holland, I wanted to talk about some options at the 37th pick. It's kind of weird going into the NBA draft this year because I'm used to the Pistons having a pretty solid first overall pick, and as long as I can remember being a Pistons fan, we always had some sort of excitement surrounding the first round draft pick. But this year, no first rounder, just the 37th pick, with Minnesota having our lottery protected first rounder this year. Obviously, the Pistons made the playoffs, so Minnesota will have that pick. So Detroit will have the lone 37th pick, and some players that I kind of liked and am intrigued by, and I hope Trajan Langdon and his staff at least pursue a little bit. And the first one being Alex Tuhey, the 6'7", 205-pound forward from Australia. He comes in, he's 21 years old, but just looking at his stats overall, in 2023 over in Sydney, playing in the NBL, Tui averaged 27% from 3-point range, and then in 2024 he increased that to 34%. So big increase in his 3-point percentage, obviously becoming more comfortable. He was only 19 years old in his first year in the NBL, and he showed a ton of improvements. But one thing that really sticks out to me is the fact that his steal numbers almost tripled from one year to the next. In 2023, 2024, he averaged zero point 0.5 steals, and then in 2024, 2025, he averaged 1.4 steals. So right there, you can see he prides himself on the defensive end of the floor, and I'm sure that he had people in his corner telling him, hey, if you want to be a consistent guy in the NBA and try and be a draft pick next year, you have to shore it up on the defensive end, and you have to become more consistent, and he did. So I really like that from Tui. I don't know if he'll be available at the 37th pick. It's a very weird second round of the draft this year, just because of so many freshmen and sophomores going back to school and utilizing that NIL money. So the second rounder looks a little bit different than it has in years past, but I do think a guy like Alex Tui could be available, and if he is, you got to take a flyer on a guy like that, just because he showed so much improvement, specifically on the defensive end of the floor over in the NBL. And then moving on, I kind of wanted to touch on Tyrese Proctor from Duke. I'm sure most of you guys are familiar with Proctor's game, watching him in the NCAA tournament the past 3 years. But what really stands out to me about Tyrese Proctor's game is, as a freshman at Duke, he shot 32% from three. He shot 35% as a sophomore. And then his junior year, he was up to 40% from 3-point range. Obviously, I think that a lot of that has to do with Cooper Flagg. I think Cooper Flagg makes everybody around him better on the basketball court. And I think that was the case again this year. So Tyrese Proctor might have had some of his success might have a little bit to do with Cooper Flagg, but I also do think that he got a lot more comfortable in spot up shooting situations. They took the ball out of his hand. His freshman and sophomore year, there was a lot of times where he was a primary ball handler, and he wasn't all that much this year at Duke, and he really thrived in that scenario. So I do think that he could be an off-ball guy that you try and go take a flyer on and see if he can't crack your rotation after a couple years in the league, because he has shown steady improvement in his career at Duke, and I do believe that he has the skill set to be an impact player in the NBA. And then moving on, the last player I want to talk about was Chaz Laneir out of Tennessee. Chaz Laneir, a little bit on the older end, 23 years old. He had 4 years at North Florida before transferring to Tennessee. And on 8.2 3-point attempts per night, he shot 40% from three, averaged 18 points a game, 4 rebounds, 43% from the field. A little bit inefficient from 2-point range, only 47% last year at Tennessee. But you can see that 3-point percentage is ridiculously high. He shot 44% in 2023 at North Florida. Down a little bit in his time at Tennessee, but he was all SEC last year. Just a really incredible player over there for Rick Barnes in Tennessee. And I think that the Pistons could definitely take a flyer on him. Like I said, a little bit older, but you expect him to be closer to his peak than a lot of other guys in this draft. And he's a guy that could come in right away, stretch the floor for you. He's 6'4", 175 pounds, so a little bit undersized, but he kind of reminds me of like a Miles McBride type player for the New York Knicks, who can be a solid bench option and come in and give you good minutes. So I like Chaz Laneir, I like Tyrese Proctor, I like Alex Tui. If any of those guys are available, I would be happy if Trajan Langdon went out and got them. But you never know. It's going to be a weird second round of this draft, so it'll just be a matter of who's available at that 37th pick. And then moving on, I wanted to touch on, just for a second, Simone Fonteio. So Simone Fonteio is interesting. He's owed $8 million next year. And for the Pistons, they're in an interesting spot because, like I mentioned in the last episode, they have $17 million in cap space. But if you were able to find a way to salary dump Simone Fonteio's contract, you could open up $8 million in cap space, which would give you $25 million overall. I don't see Simone Fonteio seeing significant minutes if he does stay on the team. So I would not be mad about attaching a second round pick to him and sending him over to Brooklyn Nets, who have cap space, trying to dump that salary. And then you can utilize that excess cap space to go upgrade at certain spots. I know Trajan Langdon has talked a lot about he wants to upgrade and get a stretch four. So if you were to dump Simone Fonteio's salary, there's a lot of options where you could go out and try and get a guy like Nas Reed or Santi Alama or something like that. I'm going to talk about some stretch bigs here in just a moment. But I think Simone Fonteio, he looked promising in his first half of season number 1 2 years ago. But last year you could see he just doesn't fit the timeline, and I think he needs a change of scenery. So I do believe that Simone Fonteio will be on the move in order for the Pistons to open up some cap space. And the reason that they're going to open up some cap space is what I wanted to talk about right now. So, will the Pistons add a stretch big this offseason? I know a lot of Pistons Twitter members and just a lot of the Pistons fan base have been discussing whether or not they want to add a stretch four and try and figure out a way to space the floor better and avoid having Asar Thompson and Jalen Duren on the floor at the same time. So, if that were to be the case, some options that I'd like to see the Pistons try and go and at least inquire about. The first one being Santi Alama. Santi Alama is a restricted free agent for the Grizzlies this year. We know with the Desmond Bane trade that the Grizzlies are open to kind of blowing it up right now. And Santi Alama is a guy who would have to probably be a sign and trade because he is a restricted free agent. But if you were able to put together a solid enough package, you offer Santi Alama $25 million a year, and you figure out a way to get rid of Simone Fonteio's contract, then you're in a really good spot to go out and get a guy like Santi Alama. He shot about 38% from three last year, just an incredible scorer overall. Struggles a little bit on the defensive end, but I really do think that Santi would complement this core really well and could start next to Jalen Duren because of his ability to space the floor. So I do think that Santi's a very, very viable option for this team. It just depends on how much it might cost. And then moving on, somebody that I think is probably the most realistic option is Nas Reed. Nas Reed is in a player option for the Timberwolves. So if he opts out, he can go out and get more money. And I do believe that he will be around $21-22 million. So like I said before, if you're able to dump Simone Fonteio's contract, then a guy like Nas Reed becomes a much more viable option. Then the last person that I want to talk about is Miles Turner. He's going to get around $30 million, I assume. So you would have to dump a lot of salary adding on top of Simone Fonteio. So I don't think that Miles Turner is probably a realistic option. I think that Nas Reed will be much cheaper and most likely, like I said, closer to like $21-22 million a year. And that is a much more viable option. So if the Pistons were truly serious about going out and getting a stretch big, I think your guy is Nas Reed. You can inquire about Santi Alama, but I would like to see Nas Reed in a Pistons uniform next year. I think he would complement this team very well. And that's really all I've got today. Thank you for tuning in to episode 2 of Pistons Daily. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below and what you think the Pistons offseason will look like. Don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, turn on notifications, and follow me on Twitter at Kyle Garrison 2, where I'll be posting daily updates regarding all things Pistons and providing episode drops as well. Thank you all so much for tuning in. That's going to do it here for episode 2 of Pistons Daily, and I will catch you all next time.